Good afternoon. My name is Marcia Stromgren, and you've tuned in to Just the Facts. I have a guest in the studio today, Ron Branstner. Ron?
A pleasure.
Welcome.
Well,
Glad to have you here.
Thank you for inviting me to Duluth.
Okay. And you came here today to give us a little idea about what Agenda 21 is. Many of you people probably have never heard of this term, but I would like Ron to explain. He has many years of researching this. I can't remember exactly how many it is, Ron. Can you tell the people how long you've been researching this?
It depends on what aspect. The Agenda 21's probably been about 9 years.
Okay. And you go around speaking in different communities to warn people about some of the tenets of what Agenda 21 is. And so I'm going to ask Ron to give us kind of a brief overview, and then he'll go into a more detailed report about what Agenda 21 is all about.
Yeah, you just mentioned how many years, and I had to think about that because all my research was dealing with immigration and the Refugee Resettlement Program. And once, after several years, I found out that it all tied into the United Nations and the agenda of the 21st century that they had created back in the early 90s. When I first read it, I thought somebody had written everything that I was talking about it because I've been studying it and explaining to people how the immigration program worked, and found out that the plan was already in works with the agenda. The agenda means the agenda of the 21st century. It started in 1992 at the World Earth Summit with 50,000 delegates, and in 1992 George H. Bush brought it to the United States, but he didn't make president the following year, so Bill Clinton signed it into executive order. Once that executive order took place, the agenda took off, and every city, county, and state started following the agenda of the United Nations. Now, most people don't know what the agenda means. It works from the local level, and it does not work unless the local level is a participant. Even though I say international, even though I say United Nations, the agenda does not work unless it's at the local level.
And we can talk about local level as city and townships and your county.
Regional.
And then regional.
Yeah, regional is probably the most important one that I like to deal with. But yeah, when I say Agenda 21, everybody kind of stirs away from that because the agenda has multiple different names. It has sustainability, it has global warming, it has green steps, green tiers, open spaces. So all of these words, if I was to say one of those words plus many more, it means green steps. They deliberately try to confuse the name because they don't want you to know that they're all tied together. They work at the local level because the local level is where they take their data from for the international community. Data meaning how much of a carbon footprint the city and the individual uses on a daily basis, and then that data is then transmitted to the international councils. When I mention these things, it's very important that all of this is documented, well documented. You can look at this and find it in your city plans when you use the word sustainability. You can find it in your regional plans. You can find it in your state plans. In fact, not only is it just at those levels, the hospitals have a sustainability plan. The colleges have a sustainability movement. So when you look at that, the educational, the medical, the state, the local, they all have what they call sustainability goals, and those goals are implemented at the United Nations at that level. The reason I'm trying to set the stage that way is because you don't want to think that it's all at the international level. That's where it was developed. But again, it does not work unless the local levels get on board. But the local level, the communities see it differently. They see it as we're going to better our community because we get a grant to the city that has sustainability attached to it. So the city says, we don't want to turn that down. I mean, we're going to get money for a park, or we're going to get money for maybe a museum.
Bike trails.
Bike trails, that's actually one of the biggest part of the Agenda 21. But these are grants and carrots that are held over the cities and the communities and the regional developers as a way to push these programs forward. What we need to do at a local level is we need to just say, okay, we can still do these things without control. We can have parks, we can have bikeways. Well, those are great things. Nobody's saying they're bad things, but we don't want to have the control of the United Nations through the sustainability movement or the grants to control us. And so what we're trying to do in several cities like Little Falls, Minnesota, is we're putting up as a referendum, and we're trying to put it on the ballot, that any grant that comes into that city must be reviewed by the people, that sustainability is removed out of the picture. And we're getting some good headway.
How many cities currently, or how many counties, maybe we should do counties, how many counties in the state of Minnesota have been accepting these ideals of the United Nations?
Well, there's 87 counties. Now, the state itself has sustainability across the board. So you'd have to say that every county has at some point, at some level, been directly involved with it. One of the sustainability movements is the environment. That's one, and then you've got the highways, like you said, the bike paths and so on. When you're looking at the upper part of Minnesota, when I say upper part, I'm talking from maybe Wadena north up to Canada. And I use that area because the sustainability goals up there have a lot to do with the environment. And the University of Minnesota owns a lot of the land up there, and they're the ones, believe it or not, are the ones who draw many of the designs, their academics, to how these programs are to be in place. There is an act that says anything on the northern part of Minnesota called the Teddy Roosevelt Act must not have any or to no development on the wetlands project, which is part of Agenda 21, another name for it. Anything beyond Wadena and up has no development should occur. So they're trying to take development away and trying to bring the northern part of Minnesota back to its natural environment to pre-1858, which when Minnesota became a state. So you could actually look up the Teddy Roosevelt Act and see that. Now, when you see that by itself, then you go down to the lower parts of the state, you're seeing sustainability in a lot of other aspects along with the environment. Again, bike trails, but you're seeing it in agriculture, in the school systems, in parks, and these are all regulated, and they're creating more regulations on the people of Minnesota. The Agenda 21 does not work. It absolutely does not work unless we join on to the program. And so far, the politicians are being tricked through grants, and these grants have then regulations attached to them. You remember what President Trump said, for every regulation that you write, I'm going to eliminate one or two. So he knows that regulations is part of the agenda. In fact, President Trump got us out of the Agenda 21 in 2016 in the Paris Climate Agreement. And with the UNESCO, he says, we're getting out of that. We're not having any part. Why was he getting out of it? Well, one of the reasons was China wasn't on board. When it comes to energy, we were picking up most of the share of the program, but also it's so much government intrusion into your life.
Well, I was on Normanna Township's board. First I was the secretary, then I became a supervisor, and we made a comprehensive plan that fit our community. It had to be approved by the county because prior to getting on the township board, they relinquished the responsibility to St. Louis County. So now St. Louis County is over us. something that St. Louis County has done in the last few years is they want all townships to relinquish their authority to send out tax assessors and are trying to get everybody on the same page. And so they, the littler townships that are finding that a very costly measure have been doing the same thing Normanna did, was relinquishing their responsibility to the county. So we have this umbrella of the county, and they had to approve our comprehensive plan under their guidelines. So I've been familiar with that since, I quit in 2009 for other reasons. I am now currently, and have been for the last 17 years, St. Louis County District 2 Soil and Water Conservation District Supervisor. So yes, I hear about wetlands, and I hear about carbon credits, and I hear about global warming and all of these things coming through soil and water. And so I'd be interested to find out, now that I know about this a little bit more, where we as St. Louis County, South St. Louis County, we have 2 soil and water districts because it's such a big county. Where we are figuring into the mix here is to what you're saying. Do you have any information about the involvement of soil and water districts in these plans? And because we don't ever hear about this on our board.
Well, normally what you should do, you first thing you want to do is check out your county sustainability program, or the framework of how the county works. When you look up into that, just look up under sustainability, and you'll see that it's written all the way through the plan. The one thing you mentioned was the townships giving up or relinquishing their authority. That was the first move that they were hoping for. When I say they, the United Nations or the sustainability movement, when they relinquished, when you give up that constitutional right of locality, you hand it off to outside the scope of your voting force, where you have your mayor and your city council, then you relinquish your rights. Now, how they're doing this in many cities, and I should look up Duluth, and you'll see that the mayor is voted in, the city council is voted in, and then they create what they call these boards, called commission boards. You have commission boards here, right? These commission boards are appointed positions by the mayor. Now these are community boards, and many of the city council people could sit on them, up to 2 people, and they are making decisions on your city, and then they bring it back to the city council, and then the city council votes on it. Well, a lot of times the city council is already sitting on the board anyways. The problem with this is that they are relinquishing their authority to community-wide organizers that are sitting on these boards that are appointed. Now, that's one entity that is making decisions on your city. When the county then relinquishes that, they go to what they call a county board or a regional board.
Regional board.
So when you go to the regional board, again, they are not elected. They are not elected. They are appointed positions. So you have no representation. So if the regional board makes a decision on your city or the county, they're in fact violating your rights as a citizen, because if it's a taxable item, it's taxation without representation, because they're making the decision. Now you're noticing this happen in the Met Council in Minneapolis. The Met Council controls all 7 counties. This is happening very fast in Region 5 with a group called Sourcewell. There's another group in the St. Cloud Sartell area, and these regional governments are being set up and appointed. And remember, they are not elected people. They are appointed, and they apply for grants, and these grants, they then write the grants, and then they apply for the grants, and then they hand them down to the elected people, and the elected people take the carrot. But if you look inside these grants, the word sustainability is inside there. That sustainability means Agenda 21. And that's how they're taking over. So when the townships, if they were to do like we did down in Little Falls, the township wrote their own comp plan, and now other townships are now writing their own comp plans. So the city of Little Falls does not have control, or the region will not have control over that township. You have to take back your community one step at a time. And that step is take back your township first. And they have no authority. And in fact, regional government really doesn't have that authority because none of them are elected anyways. But we, as you stated, we're giving that authority to them. Ask yourself about, regulations that they're putting on waterways and buffer zones. Who's doing that? The regional government is. They don't have that authority. Again, townships are relinquishing their constitutional right and handing that away to a people of appointed position. And that could be very dangerous because if you have somebody that's a socialist that is as a mayor and he's handing that authority of regulations to away to county commissioners, well then you must just hang your head up because now we're turning into a socialist environment.
Well, and I've seen this progression since I first learned about Agenda 21 way back in the 90s. And it was thanks to a fellow who was up on this stuff, who was in the Republican Party at the time, and he started getting information out to us. He showed us maps of regions where they plan to put people, and I know this probably sounds extremely bizarre to most people. It's almost like, if I can diverse for a moment here, when I was a child in a magazine, you saw these cars that could drive on the road that had no driver. They were electronically controlled. Well, we see that today. We are experiencing that today. And so what was being told to us in the early 90s about Agenda 21, it's now very visible. It's been going on for a long period of time. So we've been lulled to sleep that everything's fine in utopia. And it's going to be hard to believe some of this stuff unless, like you've done a lot of research and you're going out and you're speaking to people, and fortunately you're letting people become aware of what you have investigated for the last several years. And so that I really appreciate that you're doing that. But now let's get into a little bit more of the meat of Agenda 21 and the actual effects it's going to have on the public, whether they want to believe it or not. Sometimes it takes a while for people to actually accept truth. So what would you like to say now in regards to that?
Well, again, you made some really good points because luckily I got into this and knew about it before I ever heard the word of Agenda 21 because I thought people were listening to me and writing my stuff, plagiarizing, and then finding out that everything that I was writing, especially when Glenn Beck, he was on Fox News, he was writing about it, the same exact stuff. So if I was here for my first time, I would probably think it was too overwhelming. It's too much. It's too big. I can't do anything. And the fact is that it isn't that big because the mere fact that Agenda 21 does not work, it cannot work, if the lower levels, the mayors and the city councilmen don't go along with it. It is the sandiest part of a statue. It is where, that's the only thing that's holding it up. And if that's all that's holding it up and we take that away from it, there's no way that the Trojan horse of Agenda 21, the Trojan horse of the United Nations, can get into your city. They have to get in through local politicians and through the sustainability through grant money. And so I don't think it's that big. I just believe that people don't understand it and they believe it's too big. And I asked people to look at their city council framework, their sustainability framework, and remove the word sustainability out of it. Take away the commissions. Make the city council, the people that were elected, make them go back to doing their job. It is legal to have commissions. That is fine because that's been around since 1968. It's legal to have commissions. But when we're giving the commissions the authority to make decisions on your city and all the city council does is just rubber stamp it, then we have issues because we don't really know who that mayor is that appointed these people on these commissions. And that's where it gets, this is where I think if people in Duluth or any other city, if they were to get involved, and it really isn't that much, it really is not that much. If they were to get involved and just say, okay, I just want to read, the sustainability, the city plan. Just type, type up the city plan and type in Control F, and the word sustainability comes. You know it's in there. And they'll change the words. There's many words to the program, but it's not as big as you think because everything works at the local level.
Well, and I'm going to go back a couple, 300 years ago, a couple hundred for sure. What happened when a bunch of patriots said to England, no more. We've had enough of your rule. England was the largest nation in the world. It was well armed and, well equipped to push us right into the ground. But there was a handful of people who said, no more. We've had enough of this. And that's what I base my beliefs on and in addition to the fact that God was in control no matter what people want to believe or think. But they didn't believe in being controlled by England, and they fought it. And sure, there was a lot of disappointment, there was a lot of battles lost, but they kept on believing in their own destiny of freedom. And that's what it's going to have to take for people today, is they're going to have to say, I'm not going to be controlled. All the countries that we're looking at today are controlled by governments that want to control them, and America has got to rise up and fight against this.
Well, and that's a great way of looking at it. The issue that I see there is that government has gotten so big, and like I was sharing with you about the city council, they relinquished because it became too much of a responsibility. That's why they created commissions.
Yep.
Well, we have got to get back to a smaller government and go back to the people that are elected. And when back 300 years ago, you could walk into the president's office and ask him for a job. They could do it under Ulysses S. Grant. You could walk into the White House and ask the president for a job. Those days are gone. You have to go through a minefield before you even get to talk to your state representative or your representative, period.
Yeah.
And where we are failing, in my opinion, and I think I'm pretty much set on this one, we are relinquishing, like you said, all of our authority to non-government agencies, 501c3s, non-government organizations that are handing carrots out of grant money, federal grant money, to create programs in your city, and the people have no vote on it. So what I suggest, as we are doing down in Little Falls, I suggest that every time a grant is submitted to your city, the city of Duluth or any city around the area, that everybody that should be put up for a vote, and that vote should be that if sustainability is attached to that grant, wetlands or sustainability, the people should have the right to turn that and deny that grant. When that happens, you're going to start seeing these 501c3s dissolve because they can't survive unless they keep, creating more and more initiatives and things that you don't want, but they're creating the carrot, dangling the carrot in front of the city council or the county commissioners. So sustainability has to be removed, but everybody in the city has to rise up and say, no, we want to know. I want that. That's a grant. I want that submitted, and I want the people to see the grant before you vote on it. Is sustainability attached? Yes. Nope, we don't want it.
Well, and I think what it ultimately gets down to is someone has got to be watching every move. They must go to these county commissioner meetings, the city council meetings, your township meetings. You've got to be there so you know what's going on, so that you're aware of it before you have to be fighting off the results of it. Mm-hmm. So let's just say John Doe goes to a city council meeting. Many of those decisions were made before he gets there in the back room. So are you able to be a part of what's going on in the back room prior to it happening?
There's my point. The commissions are making the backroom deals. This is where the non-representative government happens. In the back room, the commissions who are appointed by the mayor are making the decisions. Before it ever gets to the city council, people should be able to sit in the city council meetings, or you could go to the commissioners' meetings, maybe the Air Force commissioner meetings, you could go to the Parks Commission meetings, and find out what grants they're getting. Look at their grants. It's sustainability. Now the city will probably try to play a little trick on you because they want the money. That's the carrot. They could care less about, I shouldn't say it like that, but your freedoms to them are just a job. They get a job, they get their money, and they want to be able to, the city to get the money. They're going to switch the names. They'll go from Agenda 21, which is non-existent. They'll go to sustainability. They'll go to wetlands, and they'll switch the names so you won't know. So you understand the names, get to know the names, and when it comes up, then approach them and say, no, I don't want this. You literally could take your city back in a very short time because the mayors have relinquished, as you said, at the townships, the mayors are now relinquishing their authority to commissions and regional government. And the regional government and the commissions are not appointed. So when you have a sump pump issue on a farmer's yard and you have nobody to go to, and you go to your city council and say, hey, I have this sump. They say, well, the commissioners voted on that. I don't have any say. What do you mean you voted on it for it to happen? Yeah, but they're the ones who decided that. I just voted on it. So they don't take the responsibility. Then you go back to the regional government and you say, yeah, we decided on it, but it was up to the city council to vote on it. So neither one of them will take the blame.
Take the responsibility.
Right. And so it's best that people go to these, understand the terminology, and take your city back. I don't know what you have for a mayor. I don't know what you have for a city council up here. If it's anything like Wilmer, for example, where they're extremely liberal and they've given their powers away to 23 different commissions.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
23 different commissions. St. Cloud has 22 commissions. Now, most cities have maybe 3, 4, or maybe even none.
Wow.
But they just relinquished all of their authority away. And then when you have groups of Region 5 up in Little Falls and Sourcewell that are just consuming your liberties, like the Met Council, you could fight this, but you need to go there and show them, and you go to your elected people and say, hey, you're out of here. If you don't vote this down, you're out of here. We can do this. You can beat this battle, but you have to start it because the socialist movement is here. You can see that in the kids today.
Oh.
You could see that in their
They've been indoctrinated in the system for many years.
Sure, I mean they don't care. The younger children don't care that they gave up their liberties to their cell phones, or to their iPads, or their smart TVs, or smart electric systems, smart grids. Everything's smart. It means it sounds like it's real intelligent, but in the fact it's dumbing down America, and they'll give up their liberties. Your cell phone gives up your Fifth Amendment of the Constitution, and when you, I know we haven't talked about this, but the refugee resettlement program, that when the county commissioners give up that authority to the 9 VOLOGs, voluntary agencies, they take away your 10th Amendment of the Constitution because of states' rights. We have the right to decide who's going to come here, and we tax them on it. When the county commissioners took that right away from you, handed it back to the federal government, they took away not only your 5th Amendment, but your 10th Amendment. And when you go to speak about it, they say it's not our responsibility, it's the federal government because we gave it away. They took away your First Amendment of free speech because you're acting out. You're saying, hey, I have a voice here. No, you don't. The county commissioners took your voice away from you and handed it away. The county commissioners took your voice away with you when they made up regulations for farmers in the current farm fields. The county commissioners took it away. They took it away. And we have got to stop these county commissioners. And I got to tell you, I had the opportunity to watch the county commissioners meeting just recently. And I believe in my heart to heart, and I hope I'm not wrong, there is a gentleman by the name of Keith Nelson. And Keith Nelson is I think should run for a higher office. I believe that man is dedicated and he studies everything and he's right on cue. And I'd like to see many county commissioners be as he is, because he studies everything, he represents his people, he doesn't relinquish it. Now, I have yet to talk to Keith. We just talked by phone, but I want to know more on the sustainability movement where he's at.
He's here in St. Louis County.
Yes.
Yes.
And I want to know where he's at on the sustainability movement. Now, he's very intelligent. I met him on the phone briefly. I'm hoping and praying that Keith is not a sustainability wetlands guy. I have yet to have that conversation with him, but I do know where he stands on the refugee resettlement program. And I have true respect for him as of right now.
And that issue, of course, we are facing that issue here in St. Louis County. As a matter of fact, the group that you're with earlier today is working on some research to present to the county commissioners. And so I'm not in that particularly myself, but others are from our group. And so it's not foreign to us at this point, but we're certainly getting information from it. And as a matter of fact, at our last meeting last week, Dennis, former county commissioner, the one that was in charge today, brought us the statistical information of these people and what countries and whatnot they're coming from. But after listening to you today, that's really not the issue we need to be doing. We need to be dealing with the word sustainability within our documentation and get it stopped there before we delve into the rest of it. And you shared so many things earlier today, but I know you're going to be up in Cloquet this evening, and so I'm hoping more people will be coming out to that and really getting more information, because this is not an hour-long program. This is going to take a bit more of that delving into and breaking it down so that people understand it more, because for some, I'm sure listening today, this is overwhelming. They've never heard of this before, and if they have, they didn't understand it. So what I'd like you to do now, we just have about a half an hour left, is what are some of the ramifications of these moves for resettlement and taking away the rights of local communities to be able to say no to this type of thing, and also the technology and how smart it is that's in most of our pockets, in our purses, and in our homes, and how they can keep track of every move in your life.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a couple questions there.
Yes.
I think one of them, we were talking about resettlement.
Yes.
Okay, let's just focus on that one for a moment. As you know, the St. Louis County just voted, and they didn't vote yes.
They tabled it.
They tabled it, and the vote meant nothing. Okay, so the vote meant nothing because 2020 the pipeline for refugees has already been in play through the United Nations and through the non-government organizations that they work with here in Minnesota. So that meant nothing as far as resettlement. Well, the vote was primarily for a 3-month window from June until September for them to get their federal funding money for 2021. Okay, so 2020. So 2020 has already been taking place. Now, if the vote was overturned in Maryland by a Maryland judge, if that vote had not been overturned, the county commissioners most likely would have had to have voted again in May of this month to do it up or down or to table it again. And they would have had to have voted on it for the year 2021. Now, according to everything I've read, not all of the players and shakers are in place yet, it's a little bit confusing, but it's stated where I read that they have to vote every year, because every year you could opt in or opt out of the program. And so if they would have opted out, they could have tabled it after that every year and said, nope, we opted out, we don't want anything to do with it. If they would have opted in, they could have said, yeah, we opted in this year, and we're just going to leave it that way forever. But the voluntary agencies that actually are very lucrative, it's a lucrative business for the 501c3s to create this program. This is not charity, by the way. There's nothing humanitarian about refugee resettlement. That's another story, but there's nothing humanitarian. It's very lucrative. They're hoping that the 24, 25 counties that voted for this, that they would never bring it up again. And that the people would forget about it, that vote was a permanent vote and it never changed. That's what they're hoping. The people that are opposed to having their counties bring in refugees, they were hoping that they voted once and that no would be once and never brought up again. The fact is that you can vote every year and keep it voting. Some counties like Candiota County, they voted yes. They were the first ones to vote yes, and then Beltrami said no. And Beltrami took a lot of heat for that. But it really didn't make any difference for Beltrami because, again, they'd have to vote again, and there's no refugees even settled in Beltrami. There's no resettlement agency, which is beyond St. Cloud in northern part of Minnesota. So there's no agency that would be resettling anybody anyways. So the votes up here really didn't make a hill of beans, and they still don't mean anything. But they do from Candiota, which is Wilmer, all the way down to the Iowa border. They do mean something because the voluntary agencies wanted at least 24 counties because that's how they got their funding, and that was for processing plants and canning plants and poultry plants. Because why? Because there's such a high turnover. It's a very difficult job. It's low wages. It's cheap labor. It's slave labor. It's human trafficking, and it's all that. It really is human trafficking, by the way, because we're taking people from let's just say parts of Africa, the east of Africa. We're bringing them in here, and if you look at the picture, and I want people to do this, look at the same picture of the 1800s. When the 10 tribes, the multiple tribes were fighting each other, they chased all of these Africans into camps, and then they were sold off as a bill of goods. They were sold off for cheap labor. If you look at the refugee resettlement, like Somalia, where you have 10 tribes, they chased them into camps, and they were sold off as a bill of good to the industrialized countries. So the slave labor of the 1800s and the we call it the labor of the refugee labor now, there's really no difference. We buy them, we sell them, we take them from the camps, we sell them to the states. I should say we sell them, that's not the right word. We bring them to the states, into the state of Minnesota, and then instead of the farmer being beholden to them, you as a taxpayer are the slave owner. We have to house them, feed them, clothe them, make sure they got a good education. Well, that was the same thing the farmers had to do back in the 1800s. They had to house them. They had to make sure their medical was there. The only thing they didn't do was educate them. And we do sanctuary cities here in Minnesota. Mm-hmm. Well, they had sanctuaries back in the 1800s. It was the South, and the North. When they got out of the South, they came up to Minnesota, which is a sanctuary state, right? Well, think about it. The North was sanctuary.
Yeah.
So is there any difference between sanctuary in the North and the slavery of the South? We have sanctuaries in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and then we have the slave labor outside of it. So you're seeing a replica of slave, in some cases undocumented with the illegals, or the cheap labor that we got them out of refugee camps. And this is a modern day slave trade. You look at these plants, and you'll notice that every 3 to 5 years they cycle through a whole new nationality. One year it'll be Hmongs, one year it'll be Somalians, one year it'll be Hispanics or Mexicans or Guatemala. And they cycle through them, and then the next 3 years they cycle through them again. It's a constant recycling of cheap labor. Now we were just primarily doing, the Hispanics were strong workers. But now you're starting to see more. We were getting more into the refugee program, but the refugee program went down to 18,000 people. So now they're looking again. Where do we get this cheap labor? Now they're looking to asylum seekers, because Trump only has the authority of 18,000 people because he lowered it down. But he doesn't have the authority of the asylum seekers of 350,000 asylum seekers. He doesn't have the authority over the Haitian refugees, the Cuban refugees, the diversity refugees, which is 50,000 people of color. And now there's a new refugee program out now. And that is called the global warming refugee. They say that if their island or whatever is falling underwater and it's too hot, they're refugees too. So 18,000 sounds really good, but in fact, there's a whole bunch of other programs that we're using cheap labor. And so
there's not control on them.
No, there's no control. And the same people that were in the lucrative business of the 501c3s and 4s of the 9 vologs, it's become so lucrative to them that they want more. They want to increase this to 200,000, 300,000, because they get paid per head, and then they relinquish their authority to 350 subcontractors who apply for grants, and they're making big dollars, and then they relinquish their authority to the local Christians, and then the Christians do all the work, to get these refugees to the grocery store, get them to the doctors, the pharmaceutical places. And in fact, they don't get anything. So they're the ones who are the biggest advocates for it, because they believe that they're doing this because it's a godly thing, while the people that are making money above them are making billions of dollars. This program has a whole bunch of legs to it, but if you just look at 1800s and you look at it now, the only thing different was the chains that they put on them. That's it.
The chains are going on to thus the taxpayers.
But here's an interesting part of it. If you don't look at it that way, look at it from a political side. Who supported slavery of the 1800s? What political parties supported slavery?
Let me guess.
Take a guess.
Democrats.
What political party is supporting illegal immigrations and sanctuary city policies?
Democrats.
So, and which party is opposing both of it? Republicans. But if you look at the 1800s, it was a lot of religious organizations and churches that were supporting bringing in the slave labor too. And you're seeing that same modus operandi happening today. That's the same thing. It's almost like a mirrored image. Just take off the chains and the auction block, and you have that's all done at the federal level, and you have the same replica of slave labor. Oh, and granted, you have to work your 4 to 5 years before you can apply for citizenship, and that is where you unchain yourself, and then you go and you become a citizen. You apply for citizenship. So I look at it as human trafficking. There's big money in human trafficking, from drugs to gun running to sex trafficking to human trafficking. This is a big business, and the people that support this, let's say there's people that support this in Duluth. I'll say, God bless you, support this. I want you to support this. But I want you to do one thing for me. I will support you. I want you to do what they call public charge. I want you to take that refugee or that immigrant underneath your wing. I want you to food them, house them, clothe them, only for 5 years. So as long as they're not under any government agency for money, and they're not a public charge. And if you do that, then I will support you, because I don't want you to put it on the taxpayer dollars. Watch all these religious, these do-gooders, I hate to use a word like that, these people that, these so-called humanitarianism, watch them run the other way, because it's now their dollar that they're spending, not yours. They don't want to do public charge. My gosh, you're talking about, I have to pay $64,000 in 5 years, or $257,000 for a family of 5 for 5 years. I can't afford that. Yeah, well, you stick in a million illegal immigrants and hundreds of thousands of refugees in a year. Look what that costs the taxpayer. That's billions of dollars. So we have to, there's a lot of other elements to this. You've got the health elements because Minnesota has a big issue with tuberculosis. Down in the Hennepin County, you look in Hennepin and
You don't hear about that in the newspaper?
you never hear about it, but I actually have the statistics on those cities that they're alarming. And we also there was
And excuse me, but isn't Minneapolis a sanctuary city?
they are a sanctuary
How
city.
about St. Paul?
Yes.
Okay. Well, Duluth is pushing that way because, yes, we do have very progressive liberals here in charge.
Well, if that's the case, they're the modern day slave owner.
Yep.
And they'll never admit that because they're always going to hide behind the church as they're welcoming the stranger. In fact, you're not welcoming the stranger. You're actually hindering them from being able to leave the city. Because think of it, do it this way. Think of a city as being a plantation. Okay, a plantation is your sanctuary. Your sanctuary is, okay, you can't leave outside your sanctuary. We got you captured. And that's what the Democrats did in the 1800s. We got you captured. You're in your sanctuary city. You can't leave the farm. Okay, stay inside Minneapolis, St. Paul, or Duluth. You're on the farm. You can't leave. Oops, you went outside. Oh, ICE got you. Sorry. They want you encapsulated, doing their work into their city. This is modern day slavery, human trafficking. And it's the same people. They just hide behind that. I go to church on Sunday and I put my money in the plate and then I take your money on Monday. It's the same thing. They hide behind humanitarianism. They walk around with their tie-dye shirts on, and they go, "Hey, we're the good people, and you're the haters." Really, you just encapsulated 10,000 people or 20,000 people into your city and said, "Don't leave the city, because if you leave the city, the bad people out there are going to get you. Right? ICE is going to get you. Don't leave the city. Do our work for us. Clean our dishes, do our laundry, do our clothes." Don't worry about it. We'll take care of you. Oh, by the way, we even give you a driver's license. I know it's against the law. We don't want to do that, but we'll make it legal so you just stay in here, so you can get from point A to point B.
Well, and I think the other thing that we got to emphasize here, Ron, is these people are basically illiterate. They are not well-educated people that are coming here, from my understanding. Now, you correct me if I'm wrong. But they're going to believe that benefactor. They're going to look up to that person that did all this humanitarianism on their behalf. And so they're emotionally and monetarily dependent on them, unfortunately, like slavery. And the one thing that I think a lot of people don't understand about slavery, it was, like you said, the 10 tribes, the black people selling their own people, or another tribe, I should say, into slavery. So maybe the white people transported them to America, but the original slavery started with black on black or whatever color.
Well, it doesn't matter. Slavery's all around the world.
Well, right.
And refugee resettlement and immigration doesn't have a color. Refugee resettlement does not have a nationality. Refugee resettlement doesn't have an educational level, because if you look at some countries, there are some countries in the Middle Eastern that were chased out in the camps that were doctors and lawyers. But the ones we're getting, and by the way, when they come here, they can't be doctors and lawyers because you have to follow the guidelines. You have to start all over in the United States, because the progressive left will say, we're getting some of the best, doctors and lawyers. They can't be doctors and lawyers here unless they follow the certificate over here.
I just heard about that the other day, and I thought, that's very interesting.
And they want you to believe that we're getting the best of the best, but that's not true, because you have to get certificates just like anybody else. But now, there are a very, very big element, especially when we get into cities like the processing plants that are very low-waged.
Right.
Now, there are countries like Somalia that have less than a third-grade education.
Right.
Some of these people have no education. And so when you talk to a progressive, they want us to treat that individual as an adult that graduated high school or graduated college, when in fact, their educational level is they don't even know how to use facilities, the heating system, the restrooms, and is it their fault? No, it's not their fault.
It's the culture they came from.
It's where they came from.
Yes.
And it's not their fault. But the fault that I blame is these progressives bring them here, or our system brings them here, and they don't take them under their wing, under public charge, and to educate them and bring them up faster than bring them into the element. And so we as a society, as a collective, have to take the burden of what we're given, of people who lived off of dirt and lived in huts and whatever. It's not the refugees' fault. It's not. It's the fault of these people that bring them in here and say, hey, they're just like us. Yeah, they're human, but they're not when it comes to the educational system. They should be in an orientation place, orientated to how society works, how to use a toilet, how to brush your teeth. What do you do when you're in a classroom? How do you act in a classroom? Dress wear. No, when they come off and they get in, they're stuck right into the school systems. And the school system says, yeah, you must follow. You're 17, and we'll do as best we can to get you ESL, English as a secondary language. We'll get you up fast, and hopefully our educational system will get you out of here quickly. But there's a lot of 17 years that they missed on cultural attitude. These people are not, refugees are not bad people. They're just not acclimated into the society of a first world country. And if we're going to take them in, we better figure out a way that we can put them into a culture, into a school that strictly tells them how to do this and bring them through the system. Not stick them into the elementary system where they have tuberculosis, or whether the boys treat girls with disdain or
disrespect.
Whatever. Disrespect.
Well, because they've been taught that in their
But we
beliefs.
We just need to respect the people. But again, somebody needs to take them under their wing. And if Duluth wants this, take a select group of people that really want it and say, okay, you guys are the public charge. You guys take over. It's your responsibility. And you know what? If this works out, I'll give you a key to the city. We'll walk up with doors. If this really works and you 5, 10, or 15 people want to bring them into your house, food them, house them, clothe them, if they get into any trouble, yes, you're responsible, just like a father or a parent. If they have problems in school, you are responsible. If they go on public assistance, you are responsible. Watch them run the other way. Oh, you might get one or two that has a deep pocket that says, I'm going to bring somebody over here. You might get one or two, but as a whole, they look really good when they're sitting behind a desk at the city council level or at the county commissioners level, when they can wand the yes or no vote. Oh, they've got so much power, like they're just waving like a queen. I've got the power. Really, the power to use our money, our facilities. You take them over.
Well, we could go on. This is really a very interesting conversation. My one thought on some of the things you just said. At one time, there was a quota of immigrants that could come into America. I don't know how long ago that was basically, like our Constitution is being disassembled. That was certainly something that has been disregarded for a long period of time, and the reason that was put into place is because we could handle X number of people, and they had to have a sponsor to get here so that they did have this kind of protection that you're talking about. And so unfortunately, with all of this manipulation and disregard for the way America structured things, we are now becoming a third world nation, slowly but surely. And it looks to me like it's a plan, and we're paying for it through the United Nations. It's despicable But unfortunately, it is happening, but we still have a chance to do some things like you have said, and it means get involved. First of all, get educated. And that's what I hope this program is doing today. But get informed and start asking some questions and start going to meetings, because it's in our power to do something. Correct?
The best thing I could share with people is, if you are in favor of, if you don't want the program here, and there's people that want the program, say to them, I will support you if you take them on and you become a public charge. Of 1948, by the way, was the year. I will support you, and I think we could all come together if we have a support team. That if there's people out there that want to support this program, you become the public charge, and that is a way. I don't think you'll see that. Most progressives will run the other way if they're spending any money of their own dollar. They want to spend everybody else's dollar. But there's a way, and the way is not to attack the immigrant or the refugee. We must, if they're here, if the refugee's here, they're here forever. Okay, unless they decide to leave and whatever. We must embrace what we have, but not be onslaughted, an onslaught of people that we cannot control. Look at Stearns County. Look at, St. Cloud and Wilmer, and you're going to start to see that they couldn't control it because of the secondary migration. They still can't control it. Look at their college, look at their school systems, look at their interpreters. But they do the best they can do under the circumstances with secondary migration. They do the best they can do with the racial conflicts. They actually do a very good job, but we as citizens have to, when you get into a conversation with somebody who wants it, let them be responsible for the program.
Great. Thank you so much, Ron. It's been wonderful having you here. Thank you for stopping in today. Thank you for tuning in. Bye now.